right. So today, what we want to show is not just how an emergency gets reported, but how the platform actually helps coordinate response from intake to dispatch, the field execution, and ultimately management oversight, which Abby mentioned. So to tell that story, we're going to walk through the experience from a few different personas. We'll start with Miles Dyson within our business location support portal, who's a field site manager responsible for the day-to-day oversight of multiple field locations, as you can see right here. So coming into the portal, we can immediately see which business locations we're responsible for, and we can also see that these wrap up under a parent service organization called Farah Field Research. So today, Miles is working from the Patuxent North field site, where, luck would have it, an emergency spill just occurred. So from the portal, Miles can quickly request help by just simply searching for emergency response and submitting the request in just a few steps. So we'll go ahead and just search emergency. We'll hit enter and we'll see some results that come back to us. We do have some knowledge articles down here that may be related to emergencies, or the very first thing that comes up for us is the ability to submit an emergency response. So we'll go ahead and click this. And we will now just start to actually populate this and fill this out. So as I mentioned previously, he's working out of the Patuxent North field site today. The emergency type is an environmental spill, but there are many options. So if it was a natural disaster, maybe this would kick off a different process in the back end. Maybe it would need to assign this based on different skills, based on the emergency type. But for today's purposes, we're going to roll with the environmental spill. And then we can also select the asset that the spill, maybe came from. So in this scenario, a chemical drum storage unit. And on the back end, there's actually hazardous materials that are associated with this chemical drum storage unit that once this does get dispatched to the appropriate teams, based on the type of chemical or material within these assets, it will also explain to them which PPE level gear they may need to take with them. Now, we've also added a couple of other options here, but we can configure this as needed to realistically fill this out to gather the appropriate detail based on any of these emergency types. So in this scenario, was an evacuation needed? We'll say no. Our injuries reported no. And then I'll go ahead and just copy over our emergency details. So again, a chemical drum spilled while loading it onto a flatbed truck. And this is an environmental site and could leach into the groundwater. Now, if we had images, if we had other files, we could always upload those here as well. But for now, we'll go ahead and submit. Now, the key point here is speed and its coordination. So what starts as a simple request from the field is immediately translated into action. On the back end, it starts connecting the site and the location to the teams responsible for dispatching, which I'll show here shortly, and ultimately also to the teams that are managing the emergency response. So once we've hit submit, we can now immediately start tracking the progress right here. Or if we go back to home, we can go directly into any of our business locations. So we'll go back into our Patuxent North field site. We can go down to work orders and we can view the entire list of work orders that may exist at this particular location. So we can track all of our work orders across all of the locations that we may manage. So before I move on to the next piece, are there any questions or follow-up from the team on our side, Rada?
Yeah, I think two things I want to call out and then a question. So first of all, where Dustin selected that asset, right? If we have somebody that's reporting this, they might not know what that specific asset is, right? They might not be able to know that specific number or things like that. So that is something that we can, when the crew goes on site to clean up, we can get that information. Obviously, how much ever information we can get up front can help inform the process and just be more exact so that the crews don't have to come back. But that's not something that we absolutely, need to get this process kicked off. So that's part one. And then, we're really focused on just the core field service capabilities here. When we want to bring in our Now Assist AI capabilities, that can add a lot, and I'll kind of call it out through the process. But when it comes to the self-service portal, the AI capabilities can really help with kind of searching and getting answers. So if somebody, let's say they don't know how to report a spill, they could just take that question in and we'll guide them and we'll tell them not only, submit this request in here, but also maybe like don't touch it. Make sure you seal off the area. So we can start to provide guidance and more information so that we can make as much of this process as self-service as possible, and also accelerate the speed at which we get that information, and make sure that the information we're getting is accurate. So just wanted to call those two things out on AI, and then assets not being in inventory, but of course, because we do have an asset management solution on the ServiceNow platform, everything works really nicely together when we need it.
Perfect.
The one question we did get, was, can we like configure the information intake, in that form?
Yeah, definitely. So just to go back to it briefly and just answer the question. As far as these go, these are 100% configurable and simple to do from a ServiceNow perspective. And like I mentioned, maybe there's SOPs internally at your agencies that you have specific to emergency response. Maybe there's different data that we need to gather. And this is just an example of what that form can look like, but very configurable. And we can add many different types of data points to these forms to make sure that the appropriate information is captured at the time. Yeah, good question. Anything else? Awesome.
For now.
All right, so now that Miles has submitted the request, we'll shift over to Clark Wilson, our dispatcher. And Clark's responsible for coordinating field response across multiple territories. So go ahead and open up the territory planning workspace here. And this really does start from this territory planner. And this is where Clark can get real-time operational view of the territories he supports, which includes the team locations, asset locations, and where active work is concentrated. So just to show what that looks like, if we wanted to get a better idea of where our agents currently are at within our area, we can just add the agent filter. If we want to see where our assets live in comparison to our territories that we're responsible for, or crews. And then most importantly, or maybe just as important, we can also show a heat map of our work orders. And from my perspective, I think this does a really good job of showing us where our work is most heavily concentrated. And as you have more work orders over time, and as you're actually starting to operate with the tool, these heat maps really do start to tell a more robust story over time. It really does start to visually show you, hey, we're having a lot of issues at this one site consistently just based off of the heat map. Maybe there are some things that we need to do there from like a process improvement perspective. So that's really where it sort of starts from just a territory management perspective. But what matters for dispatch is really having like that one place to understand demand, resource availability, and the right response capability. So here within the dispatcher workspace, we can see all of our work requiring action in the left-hand queue over here with that emergency request that Miles submitted right at the top. We can also now start to break this out. If we actually click on this work order over on the right-hand side, we can see the skills that are required for this particular issue, or hazmat certifications, spill response environmental certification. And if this was at like a secret or top secret location, that could also come into play to where we would actually require from a skill perspective that these individuals that we're sending to these locations have those clearances. And as you can see down here, it also shows that PPE level B kits are optional just based on the type of chemicals or hazardous materials that may be stored at this particular site. So jumping in a little further, of course, most of the assignment that you see down here, and if we're looking at David Liu just as an example, the majority of the assignments that are taking place within the platform are automated. So for things like these calibrations up here, which are preventative maintenance, these are just auto-assigned. So as those schedules come up and as these preventative maintenance tasks need to get assigned to techs in the field, these are just auto-assigned just based on the scheduling. And then we also have dynamic scheduling to where if a new task like the site assessment, just as an example, gets submitted, the system is smart enough to understand that David Liu is already on a job that's close to the location of the site assessment, and it's just going to automatically assign this to him to avoid, maybe another technician that's 3 times the distance away from getting assigned to it and then wasting all of that time from an efficiency perspective. Now, jumping back to our response to the environmental spill emergency, you can see that this does require a crew. but this has already been accepted. It's already been assigned, and we can see down here within our Patuxent Hazmat response crew timeline and schedule that this has already been slated for later in the day, just based on availability, based on skills, and based on distance. So even though this is a crew that's requiring many people, the auto assignment was still able to take place. It was still able to identify that all of the field agents that are within this crew have the appropriate skills. And now we can just move forward and start to work through that process. The last piece that I did want to touch on, though, as well, is a really cool feature is that we can also see the routes that our agents are taking currently. And it really gives your dispatcher a good idea of just understanding where within the map your agents currently are, how close to the jobs they may be, and really just assisting them in making better game time decisions at the end of the day when it comes to, maybe needing to assign something manually on the fly.
Something I'll add to that too is, not only can we show the route, but we can actually optimize the route for the work order technician, right? So it may be as work orders come in, they might still take that technician to different places, but based on the order in which they came in, they might not be in the most like geographically logical order. So we do have capabilities to optimize that route, make sure we're not sending them back and forth across the city 10 times.
Yeah.
So that's something great to keep in mind. And then the other thing too, which I think, could come up is if somebody calls out sick or somebody's car breaks down or they're missing something, right? That might take that specific worker off the schedule. So in that case, what we have is schedule optimization, which can basically take all of the work off the calendar and then re-optimize it and reassign it to the appropriate technicians, not only based on their availability, but also based on their skills that they have. Do they match what's needed? Same thing with the parts and equipment. And of course, are they close? Does it make sense? So when we talk about scheduling, we have a number of different ways to automate that process so that whether this is a dispatcher or supervisor or a manager, they don't need to sit there and then manually go through every single one and try to figure out what makes sense. They're really just going to be focused on the exceptions or those like one-off situations that happen.
Yep. And also, in the event that a task, maybe something wasn't auto-assigned, to Rada's point, it's as simple as the dispatcher just dragging and dropping these onto open windows within the agent's calendar. So really simple process and really easy to understand, who's available and when they're available. Any questions, Rada, or are we good?
Good for now.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, just with that being said, when it really does come down to an environmental spill, speed, precision are absolutely critical, which is why we do want these jobs to get auto-assigned to the appropriate crews. And, with that being said, we'll shift over now to Natasha, our field service agent and our crew leader in the field. So let me go ahead and shift screens here. Can everybody still see this when I shifted? I just want to make sure.
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. All right. So with the right crew now engaged, we can move from that back office coordination that we were just showing into the field experience directly. And from the Now Agent mobile app, Natasha and her team can see the work assigned to them and start to take action directly from the job site. And we can also leverage this, and I think this is something that I really wanted to make sure that we call out. We can leverage this from being offline. Like if we don't have service in the field, if we know we're going to go someplace where we're not going to be able to access, new information, we can just go to offline mode and we can download a cache. We can get all of the, most up-to-date information that's going to help us accomplish our job and solve for this emergency response in the field before we go into an area with no service. And it's as simple as just downloading it, setting it to offline mode, and we're ready to roll. So shifting back though to my work, this is where we can see the environmental spill task that we just originated from the request file submitted, and we'll go ahead and just open it. So if the crew was still en route, we could just click on start travel at the bottom to start that trail, that route visualization on the dispatcher workspace, and also give them that communication back, just stating, hey, okay, the crew's in flight, they're moving to the location, here's where they're at. And from Natasha's perspective, she can also just click directly on location, open up Apple Maps, open up Google Maps, and just immediately have directions right to that location as well. Now in this scenario, we're going to go ahead and just start work. We've already arrived, so I'll click start work on the bottom right here. We'll give it a second.
While that's loading too, I think one of the important things to call out with, start work, start travel, you'll be able to see later, pause, complete, all of those things, is that we're going to be able to automatically keep track of how long it takes to get somewhere, how long it takes to complete a piece of work. So that information can then be used to tie it to, labor rates, keep track of that, and start to get an understanding of like how long does a specific task take, how long does it take to get there, how long does the actual task itself take. So the best part is, right, the worker here doesn't need to be manually inputting all of these things. They just press a button and it's good to go, and then now you have that visibility, that reporting. And then, I kind of mentioned AI earlier, being able to use AI to then do analyses and say like, hey, is there maybe more information we need to provide for this type of work, or do we need to upskill people because this type of work is taking too long? So again, this helps take some of that onus off the workers themselves, so that we can then get that better reporting process improvement, and anything else related to those.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So once we've started work and once work begins, the task experience really does now expand to support this specific response. So up at the top right, Natasha can now launch questionnaires that are going to be specific to this emergency response and this specific use case, where we can start to capture critical on-site information, which I'll jump into in a moment. And her and the team can also access guided playbooks that are going to help the crew follow a consistent, compliant, step-by-step response process. So we'll just begin here, and I just want to show what this looks like to everybody. If we click on questionnaires, we'll see that for this specific emergency response, we have a hazmat spill assessment. I'm not going to fill all of this out, but I do want to fill some of it out just so you can see what this looks like once we close out the work order. And we can also collect things around containment cleanup. And I like how I said I wasn't going to fill it all out, but then I just did that anyways. But so we'll
Well, you're
submit this. Go
well,
ahead.
you're
Were you going to
going
say something, Rado?
Yeah, well, you're going with that too, right? It's, not only is this questionnaire kind of, it can be used to make sure we've taken certain actions, but think about it for use cases like inspections, taking measurements, and having all of that stuff, one, in a context that makes sense. So we're not going to show this spill questionnaire for an inspection of a surveillance camera or something like that. So
Yep,
it's going to be
exactly.
contextual. It's meant to guide the worker, and then of course, supply that reportability at the end.
Yep, exactly. So once we've completed that questionnaire, we can then open up the playbook, which again is also context specific. So we can have a playbook geared specifically around hazmat spills, geared around this maybe a natural disaster. Now, in this scenario, this is just a walkthrough of what these playbooks look like. But the goal here is to provide the teams on the ground a step-by-step process to ensure that, no step is missed, no stone goes unturned when it comes to ensuring that the work being done is completed correctly, it's compliant, and best practices are always applied. So just as an example, if we click on the first step here, we can see that this is part of the troubleshooting step, and it's saying, hey, let's look up any related articles that may exist from a knowledge base perspective. And then if we continue to go through this, we can see that there's a parts section. So what are our parts requirements for this particular field service? What parts have we used? Which parts are we removing? Like maybe we're removing this asset at the end of the day. We need to ensure that we're capturing that. We can also record our time. So our field service agents on the ground can record how much time they've spent. They can log incidentals around, maybe mileage travel. And then lastly, we can get to close work order task, which we will leverage here just to kind of close this out. But the key thing here to understand is that this can be geared towards any process, any SOP. And to Rada's point, it's really, again, just to ensure that the field crews are doing exactly what they should be doing. And if they ever run into a scenario that maybe they're unsure of what the next steps are, the playbook can provide that step to them. So we'll go ahead and close this out. And we'll just say spill has been resolved. And if we wanted to create a follow-up task and maybe there's something else left over, we could do that from here. In this scenario, though, we're just going to go ahead and close out the task.
I got a
Now,
question
oh
in the
yeah, go
chat.
ahead.
Sorry. Could we have, sorry. So the question is, if we have a piece of work that might need multiple kind of back and forth, or might need multiple steps or different visits, how do we set that up?
Yeah, good question. So similarly to how this was created, there are work order templates, which, dependent on the type of work order that gets submitted, it could just automatically create multiple tasks. So in an example, maybe you have a site assessment that is one specific task that one person or maybe one specific team needs to accomplish. Once they complete that work, a secondary task could theoretically get generated, spun up for a different type of team that now maybe needs to go do the cleanup process. So dependent on, what the actual workload looks like and which roles or personas may need to be involved, you could have different tasks get spun up that are, created after a previous one gets closed or dependent on a different team needing to take action. I don't know if you want to add to that or not, Rada, but
Yeah, I think you covered it. Another question that's come in is, can we use this for managing contractors? So
yeah, you definitely can. I'll let you touch on that though.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, so absolutely, you can use it to manage contractors. We do provide a like the contractor portal. They have access to contractor mobile capabilities as well. So providing to them as much information as possible while they're on the job. And then for you all, you'll be able to track that work order in the dispatcher workspace. Obviously we would just assign the task to that specific contractor group, and they can decide who on their side does it, but you would still have that visibility, which work order tasks are contractors, what are the utilization rates, and then even building that with like capacity planning. So we have capacity planning both internally, as well as being able to understand, how that matches with the contractors we're employing. So yes, contractors, we've got a number of different options to help with that.
Awesome. Anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So once we close it out, we're ready to roll. The next piece here is just previewing our work, and we want to confirm and sign off on this just from a compliance perspective. And so we can audit this later. We can see what work was done. This work order task summary here actually generates a PDF of all of the work that's been completed. We can see that hazmat assessment that I responded to, all of the data that I put into it, the containment and cleanup piece. And once we sign this, we're basically signing off. Yep, hey, we accept this. This is accurate. This gets generated and this gets added to that work order, so it can be tracked later, reported on, and utilized for auditing purposes. So we'll go ahead and accept and confirm here and submit.
Question is,
yeah, go ahead.
do we integrate with other solutions on signature? So I know we got things like DocuSign integrations. So we could use that. It kind of depends on what you're looking for and how it makes sense in the process. The focus here is really just signing off and saying, hey, this works okay. But if we need to bring that into another part of the process or send out that report that you saw, or that PDF, we can configure the workflow around it.
Yep, definitely. All right, awesome. So now that the work order's been closed out, we've signed off on it, our PDF's been generated, we can shift over directly to our manager perspective. So let me bring everything up here. And we'll bring it all together. So from the perspective of a field services manager, the manager workspace, which I'm in currently, will bring that operational oversight into one place. So here we can monitor SLAs, what's been breached. We can see we have 26 breaches over all of our work orders. This isn't just specific to the emergency ones that we're working with today. We can also see things like tasks by priority. We can track items that are awaiting approval if any of those exist. We can start to also gain just quick insights to overall performance through other KPIs, such as work trends, mean time to resolution, which is always popular, and then ultimately other trends like agent utilization and productive time for tasks. So over time, as we progress in our operations, we start to add more data to this, we start to get more efficient. Our trends are only going to get sharper. The ability to make better decisions based off of this data will continue to drive those operational efficiencies, and we'll just start to see more value out of this tool with more data, more usage over time. So across just this one scenario, we've really kind of seen how the platform supports emergency response from the first report in the field all the way through to the dispatch coordination, into the guided mobile execution, and then finally here into the management oversight and reporting. And that really is just the start or the surface level of the art of the possible here. Because as Rada mentioned, we still have an entire AI element that we could add to this through agentic workflows and generative AI, to really just to continue to connect people, processes, and add to that operational visibility in a single workflow. And the last thing that I would always also mention here too is these dashboards are all extremely configurable as well, much like everything else in the platform. So if there are specific things that maybe leadership needs to see, executive leadership, and so on, dashboards can be spun up very easily. We can build additional KPIs, data visualizations. It's all very configurable, very easy to do within the platform.